Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal.
Jack, a word regarding your decision to integrate Eklow's AI onto our network. I would like to formally object.
I don't have time for this, Guilfoyle.
I don't mind. AI is starting to operate on levels we don't even understand. Elon Musk himself gives humanity a 5% shot at surviving AI, and he is a Walt Disney level optimist. Right now, we are a closed system. You shut down our 8 developers and the system goes dark. But once we launch to the world, to potentially millions of users, there's no shutting down, Richard. Are you prepared to be responsible for giving sophisticated AI that kind of power?
What do you want me to do, Guilfoyle? Okay? Lori and Monica forced this on us, but they did give us K-hole games, and we kind of owe them a solid.
You're taking a technology with limitless potential and letting it run free on an experimental network that cannot be controlled or destroyed, all because you owe Monica and Lori a solid.
Yes.
The sheer banality of it all is very upsetting.
Okay, great. Well, you can go be upset upstairs. I have to go.
Well, if you don't love the show Silicon Valley, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, I have to say, Guilfoyle is my favorite character.
Oh, dude, he can have one of the comments actually on this particular video. It says Guilfoyle deserves his own series, and I was like,
he absolutely does.
with that.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, it was that show is just amazing. Oops, I knocked the headphone out of my ear. Yeah, I mean that's where we are today. Like this conversation about AI isn't stopping. I mean, every day, all over LinkedIn, every conversation we have with somebody, all of our friends that work at tech companies, it's just AI, AI, AI. And I've been here before, and we were here with web, we were here with mobile, we were here with crypto, and here we are with AI. This one's just big. It's going to be a big fundamental shift in the industry. But today's topic is a little bit narrower. We want to talk about AI and how it's directly affecting the role of a user experience researcher and or designer, and kind of respond to a lot of the questions that have surfaced on LinkedIn, Quora, and Reddit. We thought it was important because this is our industry. We've worked in it for nearly 24 years when you add our time at NASA, 25 years actually. And there's going to be huge shifts. And I know this is a slightly narrower topic for the audience, but the reality is that it matters a lot because we were here before with mobile, where Dee and I were just, preaching to the choir, of people in our industries of like, hey, these mobile apps need heavy UX on the front end. Like they're not going to get adopted by, large groups of people and get used appropriately unless you have good UI. And what does that take? It takes research, it takes designers. But now there's a narrative going around that, AI is going to remove the researchers, it's going to remove the designers. We're not going to need these people anymore. There's a lot of fear around it. And I feel bad for the people who are in the industries that are struggling right now, that have lost their jobs and are concerned about this. So we thought it'd be a good idea to jump in and talk about this and just kind of challenge each other on where we think this stuff will go based on the fact that we see this stuff every day and we might be able to help everyone in the industry. So I don't know. Overall thoughts, Dee? What's running through your head when you hear all this?
Well, I think it makes sense that AI will play a role because AI will play a role in everything. But and we talked about that a little bit offline as far as it's a little weird to me that there's so much focus on creative elements and creative implementations on AI on things like design or writing material and things like that, because generative AI is getting on board. It's just getting started, but like it's really not what AI is going to be the best at for quite a while. It's going to be much better at handling more mundane, routine, like computational kinds of things, like doing your taxes for you.
Now let's talk about this for a second, because you and I talked about this in depth prior to this podcast, and I think it's really important to discern the difference between discern. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Sure. Discern the difference between what you say is a creative task versus what you say is a non-creative task. So as you and I were talking about this, one of the things that keeps coming up in the news and everything is about all this. Oh, look, it could create art. Look, it can automatically create a website for you. Like, these are really difficult things to do that's not doing very well right now.
No.
But one of the things that they're not talking about is something that you've been like angry about almost is like there are companies, that are right now taking legal information like LexisNexis and stuff and applying AI on it and actually like transforming an entire industry. Or your better example actually really is the one for H&R Block, right? So you
Yeah.
have this place where people come and they bring their taxes, whether it be digital or paper. I think they want you to be digital now, the government. But so you bring your stuff in, you sit with someone, they go through everything for you, and they tell you how much you owe or don't owe, right? Well, these all have processes and concrete outcomes when the data is entered. So this whole industry could be completely eradicated to the point where AI is running it for the most part within a decade, and no one's talking about that.
Well,
Why is that?
here's the thing that bugs me, right? So the tax code, while complex, is intended to be unambiguous. So it is supposed to be very clear as far as what you're supposed to do once you understand all the complexity. That is something that AI can really excel at. You could have a tax bot right now, especially for maybe not for us because we're running a business and things, but for a typical consumer, like my mother, for example, right, or probably your mom too, could just use a tax bot that understands the tax code, applies everything, fulfills, you feed it your W-2s and your deductions, and it just spits it out.
Yeah.
This is something that can be done right now, can be done very well, can be done very reliably. And it would potentially be a lot cheaper and easier than using someone at H&R Block who hasn't slept in 3 weeks because it's tax season.
Yeah.
Now, on the other side of things, it's trying to do things like I look at the UX stuff, and from a data, it would actually make sense when it comes to gathering and aggregating data, especially from web sources, because it's really good at scraping the web
Yeah.
and bringing it together and leaving it up to a person to interpret and make sense of that. What it would not be very good at, especially at this point in time, because it doesn't understand very well how humans think or how they emote, designing experiences, like actually trying to replace a UX designer, especially if you're doing, working on something that's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to develop, in order to create a system that, it might leverage some best practices, it might leverage some design precedent that's out there and things like that. But it's never, or not, I'll say never. It's going to have a very difficult time for quite a while understanding what kind of emotions and experiences it can evoke in a human consumer because it doesn't have those things to fall back on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think where the concern comes in, and let's just be a little more structured about this. So we were talking about, the H&R Block example. The reason why we brought that up is because what we're trying to say is that things that have boundaries around them and are very concrete, that's stuff that's very easy for AI to do. But when you start getting into these gray areas or these creative areas, and then you have intentions. So like my intention is to have, like if I said, can you please build me a website for my business? We do user experience research and strategy. We've been around for 20 years. We do X, Y, and Z. It would produce one. But here's what happens. You look at it and you go, it doesn't feel right. There's something missing about that. How come it's not inspiring? Like maybe I should have a different type of picture. It all starts to get real messy once you start adding in all these gray
Yeah.
areas. With user experience research and design, there's so much of it is these conversations, debates, discussions, like where you're trying to figure out what is the actual emotional experience we're creating for the user. What is it that they really want? What are their needs and desires? Now, we observed these 6 users, and all of them tend to go to the grocery store every single day and buy their food. But did we notice that all of them seem tired and frustrated, and maybe they don't want to go to the grocery store, and we just have to ask deeper questions, and those deeper questions will lead to something else? That's complicated stuff to do for AI.
Mm-hmm.
And matter of fact, I don't even know if we can ever get to that point to where you look at it and you go, yeah, I trust that it's 100% accurate, that like a team of people who have been doing this forever are going to look at it and say, yeah, you nailed it when it comes to the emotional side and the need driven side where you have to like anticipate needs and stuff. Maybe it'll get there, but maybe it'll take a long time, right?
Well, for context, the vast majority of humans aren't going to be good at this.
Correct, right? You're trained to do this. This is where the job
Mhm.
thrives, right? Is that,
And
these are
even within people who are trained, it's still a subset of those people who are actually good at it.
correct. I would say that. I mean, like I have met, oh God, I mean, I don't know, thousands of people, right, that are in our industry. When we first started, there wasn't very many, right? And then
Yeah.
now there's a lot, right? And I just seeing the difference between people who were trained the way we were in experimental psychology, human factors, that kind of side of it, and then to people who are anthropologists or people who came from the sociology areas or people came
Hmm.
from philosophy, right? That alone, I was able to see the difference in their thinking and approach and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And that's what made it unique, right? Is putting all those people together and saying, okay, what are we really figuring out here, right? Are we asking the question of whether or not AI can fully replace those jobs? The answer is no, it cannot. Someone has
No.
to kind of oversee all this stuff. But I want to play a little game with you because this is based on the questions that I've been getting online and that I'm reading from LinkedIn and stuff. And I want to ask this question to you, D. With the
Sure.
rise of AI and companies always looking to cut costs, or as Scott Galloway likes to say, I think it's so funny, it's Ozempic for companies. AI is Ozempic for companies. Um, Assuming that AI can do 50 to 75%, just assume this is true, even if you disagree, of the actual head down work that a user experience researcher does on a daily basis. How is that going to affect the industry as a whole? Our industry.
Well, there's a difference between what I think should happen, obviously, and what I think will happen. And what I think will happen is we'll see in general, just a little bit of context and history. Before the pandemic, almost every company that we encountered was understaffed for researchers. They didn't have enough people. Every single person was overutilized, and they had a work overflow. And that's a lot of times where we came in, or people
Yeah.
like us. Right? It was either stuff that nobody knew how to do, stuff that they needed some of their junior people to shadow some more experienced people to learn, or it was stuff that they didn't have the resources to handle because there was more demand than they had people on staff. So that has been the standard. Now during the pandemic, a lot of these companies, they staffed up a lot because of the explosion in demand at the time. And now a lot of those people are being laid off, and I see a lot of them are people who have, I have 1 or 2 years experience and a bachelor's degree, and I was a designer before this, or I was doing something else, and I switched over to research, which under normal circumstances I don't think would be that much of an issue. But the fact that they all did it at the same time created a kind of a glut in the market.
Yeah.
I think with AI, we're going to go back to all of these industries having pre-pandemic levels of staffing. We're still above pre-pandemic levels of staffing for UX researchers,
Yeah.
from what I understand from all the data that I'm seeing. I think we're going back to that. And I think the AI will help those people be a little bit less overwhelmed, so they can handle a couple more studies at a time, or within a certain time frame. So it'll make them more productive, but I don't think it's going to replace anybody other than a really entry level person at this point.
Well, let's talk about the word replace for a minute. Okay. So when they say, oh, it's going to replace people, what they're saying is that there's certain roles or jobs within those companies where the work that the people do is so concrete, right? That by using a tool, it can spew out that information and allow somebody else to add workflow to their day, right? And get an entire person's work done within that day with this tool. When you think about our work, user experience research, what would you say is the most concrete data or process that you think AI can probably effectively do or help with that
Mm-hmm.
would dramatically reduce the amount of workload, let's say for you?
Well, I think probably analyzing quant data is probably where it would be most useful, and
I
it
agree.
would be best at. But the reality is, for the most part, AI has been doing that since SurveyMonkey started up, right? The one thing it doesn't necessarily do now is it's not necessarily great at going through all of the different ways that you can cut up the data, looking at cut up by different demographics and seeing how people from different perspectives are looking at things. And it should really just say, okay, show me the areas in which people from different demographic backgrounds or some kind of behavioral indicator, um, like somebody who drives primarily versus somebody who takes public transportation primarily, might perceive this differently, right? So maybe it's a use case for somebody who's sitting on a train rather than somebody who's driving in a car.
Yeah.
So normally, what we would do is we would cut all that up and we'd say, okay, let me look at this and see if there's a difference. No difference. Okay, let's move on to the next different, like behavioral identifier, and see if there's a difference in their perception. So if it could go through, and this is absolutely something that can be done now, it's just I don't think people are aware of the use cases. If it can just dig through all the different permutations of like this person um, is public transportation versus driving a car, or someone who has kids who doesn't have kids, or someone who is in this age demographic or that age demographic, and just go through all of them and spit out the ones where, okay, here's where we see the differences in perception or use of this product, for example, then that would be helpful. I mean, it's not hugely, it would probably save me a couple hours. Um, but it's something that I think that the AI can do really well. The bottom line is it can do if somebody is a junior level or an entry level person who's being told, here is your methodology, here are the questions we need answered, here's the methodology you should be using, here's a template for study design, go ahead and fill in the rest. That's something that AI can do, but I don't
Yeah.
know if I can ask the AI, tell the AI like, oh hey, we were having this issue with this released product, what study should we do in order to evaluate it? I don't know if it can spit out a methodology at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that because methodologies have some concrete parameters around them and examples and all those things, that in time it probably could give you some suggestions, right? It does actually. If you use ChatGPT right now, it'll give you suggestions on research to do.
Yeah,
Um, but a lot of times we do mixed methodology. Like
yeah,
we don't just say like, oh, just do a usability test. We go, okay, we're going to put in a diary because I want to know what they're thinking about this, and I want to time it on this day for this particular reason,
yeah,
and I want to catch them when they're at home with the kids versus when they're alone on the weekends riding their bike. Yeah, there's a lot of thinking that goes into it right now, like the exploring and analysis. I think you're right. I think the AI plays a really, really powerful role in quant analysis. The ability to say, like, here's the parameters of this thing. Now start spewing out all the data that I'm asking for. Start doing all that work for
yeah,
me. Like, basically killing a lot of that Excel work if possible, because it ends up telling the story faster for a product manager, right? So a product manager reaches
yeah.
out to a researcher and says, hey, I don't understand what's going on. Can you go figure it out? And if they can bring back answers within a day or two versus a week, they're going to be pretty excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
I will say there has been this kind of like saying going around or whatever that I wanted to get your take on, which is that in the future, everybody, engineers, researchers, everybody, the people who will thrive are the ones who are incredibly experienced in using and understanding all the AI tools that currently exist and how to use them. And then the people who are basically refusing to engage with AI and dig in deep and find out the tools that exist and find ways to cut costs and all these different things are the ones who are going to suffer. And I kind of agree to that to some extent, but that's been the same for every industry. Like, when mobile came out, it was like, oh, if you don't want to like think about mobile or research it or look at it or analyze it or play with it the way we all did as kids with computers, you're going to fall behind. So it's the same thing. Crypto. I mean, I'm not even, I don't really like crypto. I think we've heard this on the podcast. Like, it doesn't make sense to me still. I'm like, I don't know why we need this. Um, I went through like a 7-hour Stanford education course, engineering course on how the
Mm-hmm.
stack is built for crypto, just because I just need a frame of reference when I'm talking to people. And that's basically what they're saying. Don't fall behind, play with the tools, see how they work. Is that stuff that you feel to make someone more competitive right now who's maybe out of work and looking for a research job, to get out there and be 3 steps ahead of every other researcher and really know what AI is doing right now and what they can use? I mean,
Well,
do you see that as necessary?
I think the next wave is going to be research for the development of AI. And I think people are better served if you're out there looking for a job and you want to catch the next wave and you want to be valuable. It's less how to use AI in your job and more how to do UX research or UX design for AI itself.
Yeah. I
And
would
a
agree
lot
with
of
that.
this,
I would
yeah,
agree with that. Yeah.
I think
I
a lot of this
mean,
comes down to like, okay, when you're training an AI, what do? You feed it a bunch of data. You identify to some extent what levels of relevance for the different types of data, and then you provide it feedback. Well, how do you know what data to feed it? That needs to be built around a use case. That needs to be built around um, potentially a persona or some kind of profile of who the user is. And that's all stuff that I think is very relevant to a UX professional over somebody who doesn't really know that much about the user.
yeah, I mean, I feel like, and I might sound like a huge optimist here, but like, I feel like AI has been what we've been waiting for to work on, because it requires us to understand and study human behavior. The thing that most researchers really love the most, right, is
Mm-hmm.
people and studying people's behavior, and then figuring out how to apply that behavior into these models and build tools that will work really well. I mean, that's
Yeah.
essentially the dream job of a researcher, right? It's just
Well,
studying the behavior of people and applying it to like
yeah.
technology and robots.
I want to be clear a little bit that most of us in this industry have been working on AI to some extent or
Mm-hmm.
another for a fair amount of time, whether they were called AI tools. And we've worked on, I don't know if we can say the names or the companies that we've done it with, but we've worked on AI tools plenty of times and the explicit labeled AI tools before, things that people have heard of. But even before that, we worked on things that incorporated machine learning.
Yeah.
And that's a AI characteristic. And I mean, think about this, dude. The self-driving car project that happened, I think, was it a DARPA project or something like that at Stanford or
Yeah.
Google, whatever, right? That was like 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
And Google's been working on their self-driving cars for over 10 years, and that is a very advanced application of AI. So it's been around. We've been working on it. Almost everybody in the industry has been working on it to some extent or another. Now, what we have with ChatGPT and OpenAI and Bard and a lot of these other ones is generative AI. It's different. It understands language. That's why it's much better, which is why it's called a large language model. And it's a next step to what we saw with Siri, for example, and natural language processing. So it is, and it is an advancement. But there's plenty of AI out there, and plenty of stuff that we've worked on that doesn't really depend on understanding language at all.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be a lot more, and there's going to be a lot of development. So for me, when people say like, "Oh, AI," that's like somebody saying Python or CSS or something like that. It's a tool that can be applied in a million different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And, we've been working on AI stuff for over a decade, and the stuff that we worked on didn't come from this angle, right? As much, like a little bit, and now it's just accelerating, right? And I see it as a really big opportunity. I think that if you are struggling to find a role right now, and you were recently working on some stuff that you really enjoyed and something you had to leave, I think thinking about what Demetrius said of like, wait a minute, instead of like, how do I apply AI tools, which you try them out, you find the ones that work, you study like different promptings for ChatGPT that you can use maybe to help you with certain things. But more importantly, like, how do I become the researcher that helps build AI tools and think about the human relationship with artificial intelligence? And that's something that researchers are good at. Like, whether you're a junior or you've been doing it for a long time, your brain is kind of wired that way because you want it to be in this profession where you're answering big questions. Well, a Google manager once told me researchers are people who love to answer the big questions of why. And that is what drives them every day.
Yeah.
Like, that's what brings them into work at Google. Is they're like, why is this happening? I want to know why. They're investigators. They just can't give up on the, okay, well, it's happening, but I want to know why it's happening, right? That should be the same level of inquisitiveness that we apply to an AI tool. Why is this AI spitting out this particular answer? How can we make it better? Why do people want to use this? Who would want to use this? Like, really kind of exploring that stuff. If you're excited about it, Yeah, I think you'll find an opportunity. Also, this is that. So I surf, and one of the things that happens when you surf is you get out into the lineup, and waves are coming, and you could take any wave you want. You could take any wave you want as long as someone's not on it, otherwise they'll hoot you off. But as the wave is coming through, you look back at it and you see it, and it starts to build. And there's a part of you that might say, like, okay, I want to take this one's a little bit smaller because I'm a little bit nervous about where I'm at, which I've been in many times. And then there's some times where you'll see a wall building, and it's getting bigger and it's getting bigger, and it's really, really exciting. And you just have to be patient for that wave to come. We're in that point now where there's a lot of little waves flowing through, and the bigger waves are starting to build. There's more funding going into all these startups. I was telling Demetrius, there's like something like 840 startups that are focusing on AI in San Francisco alone, right? We're in the Bay Area. They're growing everywhere. It's starting to build and build and build, and a little bit of patience, even though it's super hard, especially when you have bills to pay. I think there's going to be a huge wave of, oh no, we're building these tools and we badly need UX people to help
Yeah.
us get them right. And I'll tell you from example, I tried out a tool, a quote unquote research tool yesterday, pretty exclusively. It took me nearly an hour to figure out how to get the data I wanted out of it. The data was good, the outcome was good, but the front end was awful. So I'm not going to say the name of it because I don't want to be rude, but like it was awful. And the reason why it was so awful was because clearly this was not designed by someone with user experience.
I think you should say the name.
No, I think it's one of those things where like they're trying really hard and they're funded and they're doing
I get
everything that
it.
they can. But
I
like
get it. But I
it,
think if you let them off the hook, honestly, we don't do this for Apple and Google and
yeah, yeah,
other
yeah,
people, right? But if you let them off the hook, and if you let people, or if people, I don't know if this was free or if people have to spend money on it,
yeah,
and they're not sure what the. I mean, if you were writing up a review on the App Store or something like that, I mean, that's to help people make the decisions. But the reality is, at the end of the day, some of these companies, and not just the company that you're talking about, but like
yeah,
anybody else who wants to develop uh, things for you as professionals, come talk to us. We'll help you out. We'll tell you where
yeah,
the use cases are. We'll tell you where we need help. Because I bet you they're gonna develop something and do a whole lot of hard work. And I'm like, that would save me 20 minutes, dude. You got to focus on other things. And I can tell you what to focus on. I absolutely can. And
yeah.
Brian and I can, and we can tell you, and we can let you know what kind of interface we need and how to zero it in and all those kinds of things. And if not us, somebody else who does this work and is used to also just developing product and identifying use cases and stuff. So
Absolutely, yeah. I
otherwise,
mean, it always starts this
yeah.
way. It always starts with engineers building something, and then the experts of that field, right, that they're building for, whether it be legal, user experience research, market research, whatever. Then those experts kind of come in, or hopefully come in, and help clean up the entire thing and get it kind of actually ready for prime time. And I think that's also another reason why there's huge opportunities right now, because after
Mm-hmm.
trying out this tool and a couple other tools yesterday, I realized, okay, they don't have a researcher or designer on staff yet. Maybe they don't have the money for it. But the thing is that those people are going to be the ones that are going to guide the product to the
Yeah.
mass market because it has to be done. So
Get
I want
somebody
to
on board. Give them some equity.
give them some equity, bring them on board, and just help make it work. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people who are looking for jobs right now in that space. Now I want to talk about another question that came up on LinkedIn um, is that they feel like the role of a researcher has changed, which I think you spoke to this a little bit, and it's this idea that you need a master's degree or a PhD to even be considered with any of the job interviews, because a lot of the companies are using AI in order to filter out the applications. And those
Mm-hmm.
applications are looking for people with masters and PhDs only, not necessarily people with bachelor's degrees, where the majority of people that I've worked with, to be honest with you,
Mm-hmm.
have bachelor's degrees who are doing research. We happen to have a master's, and some of the people that we highly respect that are in the industry right now or just recently retired from it have PhDs in it. So
Sure.
I don't know where you land on this. I mean, you think it's necessary to go back and get a master's or PhD in order to be competitive in this industry moving forward?
In order to do great work, no. In order to be considered for these jobs, maybe. What I would tell people who are hiring, and I wonder how many of the people who are actually hiring and writing these things up are actually researchers, as opposed to somebody in HR or somebody else who's kind of putting out arbitrary stuff.
Uh-huh.
I have known plenty of people with bachelor's degrees or even just associate's degrees who were great researchers. I've known plenty of people who had um, degrees in fine arts or engineering or plenty of other disciplines who made great researchers. So I can understand because there is, there's a lot of talent and you're trying to filter out the best. Honestly, I don't run into a lot of PhD people who are great at qual. Um, there are, I've met them, but a lot of them not as much. So I wouldn't necessarily say that just because somebody has a PhD that they are better than somebody who has just a bachelor's degree. I would rather take somebody who has a bachelor's degree with years of experience working on a great product over somebody who has a PhD who just came out of school a few years ago and has only worked one place and on one project.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the situation. I think it's a natural human instinct that when you're kind of being beat down a little bit, which we have been too. We've had years that are lean where we're like, what's wrong with us? And it just happens to be the industry. Is that when you're beat down a little bit, you start to go, okay, what's wrong with me? And then the first thing that comes to mind is like, okay, well maybe I don't have enough education. That's always the first thing. Okay, maybe I need to go back to school. Maybe I need to take some online courses or that may be the case. It may be the case, for example, if you, let's say, came into user experience research from English, you might be really good at writing scripts and stuff like that, but just need a little more practice on the side of like understanding how to build methodologies and that kind of stuff. So maybe you want to go find some education in that area. But it's not always the case. Sometimes it has to do with like, can you discuss your previous experience really well, but more importantly, talk about outcomes. And this is something that Dee and I have been promoting heavily. We promote it internally with companies that we work with. We always say, we are going to tell you what the outcome of this is. And we're also going to tell you what we predict. And we're also going to tell you what we think you should do, which is something that researchers tend to not do very often. They don't
Mm-hmm.
want to tell companies, potential employers, like, here's what I would do if I was CEO of the company or if I ran this department or as a product manager. That's important to have a voice like that because researchers are peeking around the corner and telling you what's coming. So I really want to know what they think, to be honest with you.
Yes.
So to answer this question, it kind of depends. But like if you need more education and you can feel it in your heart, like you just don't have enough, then absolutely go after it. But like I don't
Yeah.
necessarily think you need a PhD. I think you just need to go find the holes and fill those gaps.
Yeah. And the nature of the role matters also. If you are going to be, a product researcher who's going to be cranking out usability tests and usability baselines and things like that, then you don't necessarily need a deep understanding of research methodology. You're going to be repeating the same methodology over and over again. If you're
Yeah.
going to be more of a generalist, or if you're going to do what we've done a lot, which is generate new methodologies, then you probably do need a bit more education.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that I think that AI is going to struggle with. Way back it's dating ourselves a little bit. Way back when turn by turn direction apps were coming out, back when people were still printing out MapQuest directions, we worked with a large company. We on testing turn by turn directions, and they wanted to do it on actual streets with actual drivers and do it, but to do it safely. And we had to invent a new methodology in order to be able to do this. I
Yeah.
don't know that AI could have done that.
No, it wouldn't have. I mean, even if it made a suggestion of like just go test it out, this actually turned from a um, can we test it to should we test it from a safety and legal perspective. And you and I had to
Yeah.
figure out the legal and the safety side of it, right? So it took a collective brain of a couple different people to come together and say, can we pull this thing off? Because
Hmm.
X company that wanted us to do this didn't want the liability behind it either. And so, no, I don't think AI could have done that. But I also think that we're also handpicking cases where, we're kind of testing some big and complex things because we did a lot of that. I think a lot of research that happens internally is just basic usability testing. You know what I mean? It's just like, hey, I have this. I just need to test the UI over and over and over again. And I think one of the concerns is that if your role or your job is to basically just do UI testing and A/B testing on a regular basis, that those two things can be done by
Yeah.
AI pretty well. Do you think that that's something that they should be concerned about, as if that's the only thing you're doing from a research perspective?
If I was running a research team within like a FANG company, I would not. I would probably would integrate AI for some usability testing, but I would probably do it much more for the iterative testing. I
Yeah.
think the first round of maybe the first, maybe the second, having a human moderator involved, or at least somebody who's going to. Well, the first one, I think you need a human moderator, because here's the thing: if you find like some real backbreaking stuff that's wrong with the app that you're developing, you
Hmm.
got to figure out how to fix it. And there's a question of that's where the art of the follow up question comes up of like, all right, you don't understand this, blah blah blah. How can we make this more clear? How can we fix this? How can we make this more intuitive? I don't know that an AI is going to be great at that. Even right now with unmoderated testing, it's not great at that because people usually need to have a conversation with someone in order to suss out their thoughts about like what could potentially fix it or what they're actually feeling. They could say things like, I'm not sure how I feel about this," and you talk to them a little bit, and then it comes out that they're frustrated or they're disappointed or there's something scary about it. And that's where I think that you have to have that ability to both recognize that an emotion is happening and also be able to dig into the reason why. And I think you could probably program an AI to identify emotions.
Yeah.
You feed them, Ekman's information on micro expressions and things like that, and it can
Yeah.
identify the emotions. But if you ask the AI why they're feeling that way, I think they would struggle really hard.
Well, yeah, because there's no context around it,
Hmm.
right?
And
I
they don't.
mean,
I
you
think it's
could
hard
tell
for them
them
to
what it is,
formulate how
but
to get that information.
well, we all know just from, either knowing, working with, or engaging with therapists that a lot of times if people say one thing, it doesn't actually mean that's why they feel that way. It's just their defense mechanisms kind of coming up, right? So it's like
Yeah.
it takes a lot of digging and it takes a lot of, self reflection to kind of realize that, oh, I'm angry actually because of X, Y, and Z that happened a long time ago or whatever. And that's kind of proof in the pudding right there that like humans are much more complex than just like a smile equals happy, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just not going to resonate. I will ask this question of you that I think I've asked you before, and it's been a long time, but I'm curious: is that like if you were only knowing what you know now, if you were in the industry of being a user experience researcher and you've been in it for let's say 2 years, do you think knowing what you know now, looking at the field, looking at everything, that you would change directions and do something else? Or do you think you would stick with it and push your career forward in research?
Ooh, like if it was right now.
Right now. Yeah.
Hmm, that's a really hard question. I was still kind of come back every now and then and think to myself, what would have happened if I had gone down the engineering route, um, and just had a little bit more involvement in the building of things as well as just the designing of things. Because sometimes I think the way that UX design and research get treated within organizations is like it is easily replaceable or unnecessary and or not as important.
Yeah.
And I think when you can build it also at least down to the prototyping level, I think that it raises not just your value, but your the level at which your input is perceived within the organization. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I would do it the same way, but at the end of the day, I do love working on products. I am like Bryan said, when you're a researcher, especially, you're really driven by the reason why, and that's something that for me it doesn't turn off. Like I don't like it doesn't hit 8 o'clock at night and I stop thinking about how these things are going to develop or how these things are going to work. Like it doesn't stop on the weekends. It's like 24/7. I'm always thinking about why people are doing this or what do people need or how does this need to be developed or how does this need to meet their to fit for them and how is AI going to do this in different ways. It's a 24/7 mindset. I don't think I could stop that.
Yeah. So your answer is you would have gone engineering?
I probably still would be doing UX. No, I would be doing UX, but I think I would want to have more to be prototyping also.
Got it. Okay. So having your hands in the early development of the product and that kind of stuff, but having kind of the more UX background.
Yeah.
The thing I struggle with is like, I feel like, I would agree with you. Like, me, I like to get my hands dirty. I'm always building prototypes, building things myself and that kind of stuff, but definitely don't have a formal background in engineering or anything like that. I just kind of figure it out as I go along. It's interesting. Mark Cuban was given a talk recently, and I listened to him kind of closely because I feel like that guy in particular, because he invests into so many things, he always kind of gives hints on what he's seeing. And even before ChatGPT came out, about 4 years before, he said it's going to fundamentally change. He said in the next 2 to 3 years, everything you ever thought about this industry. And he's like, AI is coming hard. Trust me, please trust me. And he was like telling everyone, like, get ready, start studying what this stuff means. And I think it's because he kind of knew. I think he kind of saw the
Mhm.
writing on the wall for all these things. And one of the things that he said is that now when kids are talking to him and stuff, he says, think about this. Things like philosophy, psychology, all the things that you and I are trained in or experienced in, um, uh, research, all that stuff. He's like, that stuff is now going to become front and center. And that's going to be the most important stuff. And the engineering and all that is going to start to fall further and further behind. And the reason is in priority wise. And the reason is because that engineering stuff, as you said, is incredibly concrete. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, write me this code, do this thing, create a little prototype that shows X, Y, and Z, and now the system can do it. Well, guess what they can't do? They can't think about that relationship to the human and the psychology and all that kind of stuff. That's where those degrees and everything come in, and now it's our time to shine. And that is essentially what it is. We've been working in the industry steadily, obviously, for the last 25 years, with NASA. But like, if you go past that, it's like during that time period, everything that you said actually happened, which was that, we were devalued many, many times when we said, hey, you should do X instead of Y. And then suddenly the whole thing crashed and it frustrates us. And like, we've had many of those moments, just like everybody in the industry has had. But it's always been engineering as being front and center. Like, oh, here are the stars, right? The engineers, because they can build it. But now, with AI being able to build things itself, it now comes to, okay, now who's going to design it? Who's going to think about how it interacts with the world? Who's going to think about the strategy that is going to be applied over the course of X number of years as we deploy this product? It's going to be people who are thinking from
Yeah.
more or less a perspective that's different than just concrete engineering.
Well, I think the example that we brought up about the quant evaluation using AI, and basically, I mean, what you're doing is you're running an MRC, right? A multiple
Yeah.
regression correlation. You're seeing to what extent each individual variable is correlating to the outcome variable that you're trying to get. Or you can do a stepwise regression correlation. You can do a factor analysis. You can do all these kinds of things that with an AI really effectively if you feed it the data and you set it up properly.
Yeah.
But if you're not a researcher who does quant analysis at a deep level, then you would never know that that would be something that you would want.
Exactly. Right. So
Yeah,
this is my point. Like,
just not aware of the use cases.
I think what we're seeing in the industry is like this trim down because everyone's like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like AI, like it's going to take all of our jobs, and everyone's trying to go as lean as possible. It's pre-election, like all this kind of stuff's happening. And then I think what's going to happen is they're going to go, oh my God, we need all these people. And then you start seeing
Mm-hmm.
hiring happen again and again. And they're going to start building up teams because they got to get their AI to be better than the persons across the street. Right. And it's like, in order to do that, you need people. You need people who study psychology. You need people who study
Yeah,
anthropology, right. To like figure out how it applies. And right now we're just in this space where everything is lean because no one really knows what's going to happen. But I had this revelation after trying out some of these other tools yesterday, is that I think this next phase is going to be about trust. And what I mean by that is that I was looking at the data that was being spewed out from these different tools, and I was like, "Oh, it's really good. It's very well organized. Tells a good story. I love the imagery and pictures that it creates on personas and user journeys. Like some of these tools are really good. Like the output's really good." And I thought to myself, "But I don't, as a human, right now, I don't know if you did it right.
yeah.
I assume you did it right because you're telling me you did it right, but I don't know." And so now we're at trust. And it reminded me of a little story that I want to tell everybody, is that Dee and I were testing payment platforms for like years. It was like there was like this phase
Yeah.
for like 2 years where everyone had a payment platform, and we had to test them all. So we were testing all these payment platforms, and one of the people who were having us test their platform was not from United States. And as we were testing the platform, we were having U.S. People come in and test it out, and some of the people would say stuff like, I'm not going to put my credit card in. Oh, let me frame this up. Dee and I decided that when we were going to run this study, we were going to ask people to actually buy a product with their actual credit card, because we wanted them to commit emotionally, physically, actually, and step
Mhm.
over the line and actually buy something with their card, not one I gave them, because we want to know if trust was part of this, right? So this is one of the little things that we thought up as researchers.
This was
So
also, I'll point out, before Apple Pay, before Google Pay. This was
before all that, right?
very early on in the
Yeah.
process.
So they come in and you can literally see them freeze when they're about to put in their credit card with this company, right? And
Mhm.
I mean, the people were super nice to the company. It was like nothing wrong, but it wasn't based in the United States. And we started digging deeper, and what we realized was there was a huge trust issue, that because we weren't offering a payment platform or a payment solution that was based in the United States, the people who lived here were like, I don't know, am I giving my credit card information to somewhere outside the United States? Could it get stolen? Blah, blah. Like they just had so many thoughts about it, which is totally normal, totally natural, nothing wrong with it. But those thoughts didn't come up when we were testing it with stuff that was either built or based here. And so it feels the same way with AI right now. Is that like I'm looking at this and I'm saying like, okay, great, here are these researcher tools that I'm supposed to use. But unless I spend a lot of time going back and look at the logs of how every action was taken to gather the data that you displayed to me, I have that little thing of trust in front of me of like, I don't know if you did this right. And I don't know how long it'll take for that to go away. I mean, it took 15 years for people to say, I'm okay with saving my data in the cloud.
Yeah,
I
it
worked
took
on
quite a while.
pre-cloud stuff and I couldn't get a person to upload their data to cloud. And
Yeah,
now everybody uploads to cloud. So I'm not sure how long it's going to take for the trust portion to build it to work out.
and people overlook how much they are trusting some of these companies. So we had a conversation earlier about some AI and AI getting access to the data, and I made the point that like, these companies with AI already have the data. And it's like, well, what about this document? I was like, well, you mean the document that was probably made in Google Docs or
Yeah.
in Office 360 or
Yep.
in Keynote or one of Apple's products? They're all held within that company's cloud at this point. Even Adobe products they have their Adobe cloud, which I think they're
Yeah.
shutting down now. But like almost everything is being we're already trusting all of these companies with the data, and for the most part, at least for us, it's worked out. We've never had a problem with data breaches or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean it's been great once we transition to like the big player clouds, right? And I think that's been helpful. And it's like we also don't hold any data of our clients. Our clients are sharing it to us, not the other way
Yeah,
around, right? Honestly, the big word of trust. And so how do we get past trust? Well, researchers and designers and people like that are going to help figure this out. That's their job, is to figure out how are we going to push past trust and allow people to trust our applications or AI and the outputs and all that. Once again, more roles for those individuals. So
yeah,
I have a lot of optimism for what's going to happen. I think you're going to see a lot of the roles that were eliminated come back within the next year. And the reason why I say that is every time, and I always tell Dee this, like we've been in this business for a long time. I'm like, we're about to have an election. The year of the election, it's wonky and weird, and people get freaked out, and everybody hoards their money, and it's just like a weird thing because they don't know what the policies are going to be. They don't know who the individual is going to be. It's just a chaos thing. And
yeah.
so once that's over with, and everyone's like, okay, this is what we got. Then everything smooths out, and all the spending starts to kick in again, and all that.
Well, make no mistake, there is an arms race coming.
Oh yeah.
And this is going to show up in not just, everybody's going to have their AI tool. Everybody's going to have 15 AI tools because they're all going to need to do different things, right? You're going to have your large language model thing. You're going to have your personal assistant AI. You're going to have your home management AI that's going to manage your windows and your shades and your fire alarms and your thermostat and everything. There's going to be an individual AI for everything, because right now we don't have general AI. We don't have a Jarvis that's going to handle every element of it. We're going to have little individual tools that are each going to do different things, and they're going to need people for UX, engineering, marketing to manage all of that. And you can tell by looking at Nvidia stock. Nvidia stock isn't going crazy because they're like, oh, look how many Radeon RT or RTX 4080s they're selling. It's because they're anticipating that all of these companies are going to be buying computational power from Nvidia in order to develop these new tools.
Exactly. Exactly. So where do you let's do predictions and wrap up here. So where I want you to give a prediction of the next 24 months. I don't want to go long on this. I want to go short on this. So 24 months on the industry of user experience. Because right now it's taken some punches in the face.
I think it's gonna. I think it's gonna continue to be lean for probably the next, probably till the end of the year at least, maybe a
Uh-huh.
little bit longer than that. And then I think you're going to see some people loading up, and I think it's going to be loading up in a new way. I think there's going to be a new paradigm around working on AI tools, and people are going to develop models for, how do we develop training systems or identifying necessary tools around use cases and things like that. So there is going to be some new approaches to it from both a design and research perspective, and not all the people. What that it means is, I think there's going to be a turnover in maybe who the people are. Maybe the people who fill these new roles aren't going to be the same people that filled previous roles. In the same way that the people who worked on Web 2.0 weren't the same people who worked on Web 1.0.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a little bit of a change into the guard as far as the staffing themselves.
Okay. I 100% agree with what you said, and I would have said basically almost the exact same thing. So I'm going to add one extra piece to the back of that is what do you think, and I'll tell you what I think after this, but like what do you think people should do in order to put themselves in the best possible position to get hired? Specifically as a UX researcher, because we're researchers. I don't want to talk about designers because I think that's other people I think would be better served talking about that. But specifically a researcher, what would you do right now in order to put yourself in the best position?
I would start getting as much training and knowledge around AI and how it works right now. I would start learning about what is the difference between, uh, you know, uh, generative AI, reactionary AI, short-term memory AI, all these kinds of different tools, how the training programs work for the AI, the difference between supervised and unsupervised learning. I would know all of that. I would start having conversations with people about like what are the best feedback mechanisms and methods in order to get things done for supervised learning. How much humans are going to be involved. Um, Start digging into what the use cases are. Because what happened with ChatGPT when it came out, everybody says, "Oh, this is really powerful," but I'm not sure what to
I'm not
use
sure
it
what to do with
for.
it. Yeah.
That's what UX is supposed to do. Is we're supposed to step in and identify what you're supposed to use it for, build experiences around that specifically, so that they're guided. And as you're going through like an interface on a new app, you have, the bigger buttons are what you're intended to with that are bright colors are the ones that you're leading you through the app. That's the kind of thing that needs to be developed into some of the AI tools a bit more, including these large language model AIs, so that this is a thing that does this for you. It can also do all these other things, but this is your hero use case. This is your anchor. Use this, and then you will also discover that there's some other things that you can do with it also. So
Yeah.
start thinking about what those things are now. Start writing about it, talking about it, having the conversations, because when that arms race really takes off, the people who know the stuff and are more experienced with it and have been talking about it and thinking about it are going to be the ones who are going to be the most valuable.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. Only thing I would add to that is that you said use case. I think that is so, so, so important right now that people wrap their heads around which use cases would be the most effective and which ones would actually fundamentally shift industries. And what I mean by that is like grab a piece of paper and literally sit down with a cup of coffee or whatever it is, your choice of beverage, and start writing down, okay, where could AI be applied where it would fundamentally shift an industry, but can actually be done right now? Then isolate the ones that are the most exciting to you and most important to you, and feel like they would challenge you and you'd be excited to be part of that, and dig in super deep, and then start reaching out to people within your network and start trying to get into those particular places. I
Mhm.
feel like with AI, so many people are like, oh, I just need to find a job where there's AI, or like, because AI is so important. I'm like, no, you need to find a job where AI is applied or being used in something that you are intrigued by. Just whether it be self-driving cars, law, medical, whatever it is, and get obsessed by it and really research it. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to go into a job interview and you're going to be talking about their product. And then suddenly your brain is going to start weaving into other products that you've researched and thought
Yeah.
about that are in their industry. And you're going to talk about ideas on how they can shape them, and research projects that could be done in order to fundamentally, blend the AI with the human interaction. And then suddenly they're going to go, wow, you're like really into this and really thinking about this. And then you're going to be the one that gets the final interview or the job.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, most of the clients that we work with, when they come to us, the very first question that they ask us, now I know this is also part of just working at owning a firm or an agency, but is like, have you done this before? Tell me about the projects you've worked on. What were the outcomes of those projects? How did you guys overcome them? How did you come up with the research methodologies in order to test it? Like what should we be thinking about? Right? Like,
Hmm.
they're looking for help. And so
Yeah.
if you just generally understand a category, but you never went deep, it might be a sign that you're not that interested in it. So you should dig into the ones that matter to you most, because you're going to be able to talk very confidently and smoothly about it. And Dee and I don't know everything. We don't get everything right. We've been running a firm for 20 years. We have years that are so good that Dee and I can't even lift our heads up. And we have other years that are lighter. And it's how it's been for a really long time. And we're just kind of used to it at this point. But the one thing we do get is really honest um, conversations and feedback from very high up individuals about things that they need and want and stuff like that from their
Hmm.
companies, just through our general conversation. And so we want to make sure that we can share some of that so it helps everybody out in our industry.
Yeah. And the only other thing I would say is that if you're not in UX per se, if you are an investor, if you're in leadership, if you're an engineer, keep in mind that you have to at some point bring it all back to your value proposition, and that all
Yeah.
flows through use cases. So uh, we are not really in the business necessarily of just developing capabilities for capability's sake. But at some point, the rubber needs to meet the road. You need to be able to tell your customers or your users, this is what this thing can do, but this is what this thing is for. And the
Yeah.
two things are not always the same. So I see so many companies out there who are developing capabilities that are never going to be used because they're not wrapped around, they're not delivering value at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
that I think needs to be remembered. That needs to be brought back to the forefront because we're not in academics. We are developing things that are intended for people to be used.
Exactly. And so I'm going to wrap up by saying that Demetrius wrote a one-page article that is on our LinkedIn page. So Metric Dash Lab, you'll see it. It's the black square with an ML. So go on our page and follow us. And we're posting like as much as we possibly can think of, anything that's helpful for like how to conduct interviews to everything on that page. That is going to be our central repository for just all the knowledge we want to give back to the industry. So if you haven't started following us, follow us. And then he wrote an article recently about this topic. You can take that, steal it, cut and paste it, use it in your interviews, whatever helps. But we wanted to get some of the stuff out of our brains, and Demetrius was awesome enough to sit down and really kind of craft this whole thing together to share with everyone. So thanks everyone again for listening to us. We really appreciate it. We are on YouTube or on all the different platforms. We appreciate your support. And you will see us all next week. I believe next week, D, is our last episode of the season, right?
Yeah, I think so, right?
Yeah, yeah. So we'll wrap up with something fun to talk about. So thanks everyone. Good luck. Keep fighting for that job or that opportunity. It'll come. Just might need a little bit of time. So, all right, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye.